Okay, good afternoon again. Today we're going to be going through kind of the second half of this transformation thing. You got a chance to do some practice. There's a little bit of instant feedback on how you're doing with those things. And then at the end of class here, we'll talk about what you're doing tomorrow with some more practice on the stuff. So yesterday we talked about our three different types of transformations, our reflections, rotations, and translations. We talked about how the original is what the picture starts out as, or the shape starts as, and then the image is the after of that shape. A translation is something you probably just called a slide before. Just imagine sliding that shape across the paper. A rotation is like a turn. The point you're turning it around doesn't have to be inside the shape. Just kind of imagine like holding your pencil right on that point and turning the whole paper underneath it. That's kind of what a rotation is. And then a reflection is flipping that image over some sort of a line. So we're going to do kind of three examples here, just kind of on this, and then we'll kind of look at what it looks like on the computer application we're going to be using. So here we've got our first figure, and we've got, it'll always be labeled A, B, C, and I'll keep these labeled the same way as we go. And when you get a translation like this, it's going to be marked a couple of different ways. So the first way is it could just say translate like 3 to the left and 2 up. That's going to kind of be the simplest option. And so all we have to do, this one is going to seem pretty obvious, I think, for most of you, is we're just going to take each point. I'm going to do this in a dotted line so you can see. You don't have to draw this in. It's going to go 3 to the left and 2 up, and then that's where you're going to put your new C. And we talked about yesterday in the video how we're going to call that C prime. And then we just do that same thing for every other point. B is going to go 3 to the left and 2 up. There's B. And A is going to go 3 to the left and 2 up. There's A. So we'll put our points there. We'll label them A prime and B prime, and then we'll draw our triangle in. And there's our translated shape. We could translate any direction, up, down, left, right, any amount. You'll notice it's just kind of slid across the page. And again, those red lines do not need to be there. That's kind of just, just to show you what I'm thinking. I would encourage you to kind of maybe draw it in lightly or make sure you're actually counting the boxes out. Really the only mistake here you could make is counting incorrectly. Another way I could say the same exact thing would be to say translate -3 in the X direction and 2 in the Y direction. That says exactly the same thing that it did before. In the X direction, going to the left is a negative. These are negative numbers down here. And in the X direction, this would to the right would be positive. In the Y direction, up is positive and down is negative. So -3 in the X would be to the left, 2 in the Y would be up. Same exact thing. The last thing I could give you instead of any words is a translation vector. We talked a little bit about this yesterday. If I were to give you a vector that looked like that, again, that would tell you to do exactly the same thing that you just did. We'd be going 3 units to the left and 2 units up. So you can kind of look at where that vector starts and stops, and that's going to tell you what to do with it. So that one's pretty easy. Then we've got reflections. These are kind of the next easiest of all of them. A reflection is going to have to tell you which line to reflect over. And so you're going to get 2 options. If I'm reflecting over this, that is the x-axis. And all I have to do, let me put my A, B, and C back on here. For each point, and I'm going to switch back to a dotted line because you're not really going to draw this part. I'm just using it to show you. For each point, you're going to want to see how far it is below the x-axis. So C is 1 unit below, and you're just going to go 1 unit up, and that's where you'll put C. B is 3 units below, so you go 3 units up. The x-coordinate 4 never changes if you're going across the x-axis. And then for A, you're again 3 units down, so we're going to go 3 units up. Then you can go ahead and put your points in, label them just like before, A prime, B, Come on. B prime and C prime. And draw in your triangle. Now, the other thing that we could do is we could go across the y-axis. And we're going to do the exact same thing for that. Let me switch over to the dotted line here. We're going to look at each point. A is 1 unit away, so we're going to go 1 unit away to find A prime. B here, even though it goes across A, is still just fine. That's 4 units away, so I go 4 units away to find B prime. And C is 5 units away, so I go 5 units away to find C prime. And then again, I can just put in my triangle, put in my A prime, B prime, and C prime, and then I've reflected across the y-axis. And so that's reflections. A couple things you'll notice here. If you're reflecting across the y-axis, you'll notice that the y-coordinate stayed exactly the same on all these points. A stayed at -3, B stayed at -3, and C stayed at -1. It's the x-coordinate that changed because it had to flip from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. When we were going across the x-axis, it's the y-coordinate that changed because we had to go from the bottom up to the top, from a -y to a +y. Okay, the last one here is rotation. This one's the trickiest one, I think, for pretty much everybody. And I'm going to give you the one best strategy that I have seen work for people. There are a couple of more that work for some people, but this one's definitely the most common. So the absolute easiest thing you could do on this is turn your actual paper. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a screenshot of this and just kind of paste it back in. And then we'll shrink it down to try to make it match the size here. Not sure why I wrote the primes in there. Let me redo that. That's not the original. That's not the new one. That's the original. It doesn't get primes. Okay. I'll try to shrink it down so that it fits on the page. Matches up more or less. Okay, and so you'll end up with something like that. You got your paper, now I can actually turn it with you. Let me just put it on another. Let me put it on another sheet of another page here. That might make more sense. Doing it like you really would do it on paper. Oh, that's weird. There we go. Okay. So directions for this are going to look something along the lines of rotate a certain number of degrees and a direction. So we might have something like rotate 90 degrees counterclockwise. That might be our directions there. So just as a quick reminder, 90 degrees in this case is going to be each of these kind of corners is 90 degrees. If you turn your paper like just to the side, that's 90 degrees. 180 degrees would be if you turn your paper completely upside down, and then 270 degrees would be like 3/4 of the way around. So like that would be 270. So that's kind of what your options are for these, and it could be clockwise or counterclockwise. Counterclockwise is this way, and then clockwise would be the other way. So if we're going to try to rotate this picture 90 degrees counterclockwise, I'm literally suggesting that you take your paper and turn it. So we'll start with doing A. I'm going to turn my paper 90 degrees counterclockwise, and I'm going to look at where point A is. So point A was from the origin 3 units to the left or to the right and 1 unit up. So I'm going to go back to my original paper, and I'm going to graph the point that's 3 units to the left and 1 unit up, and that is going to be A prime. Now on mine, it's just going to stay there because it's not actually attached to the paper. Actually, I could make it attached to the paper. Why not? Okay, so now it's attached to the paper. So now I turn it back around, and let's do B next. If I turn it over this way, B is found by going 3 units to the right and 4 units up. So I turn my page back around and I go 3 units to the right and 4 units up. And that's where B prime is going to be. And I did not put this in a good spot, did I? So that's where B prime is going to be, 3 units to the right and 4 units up. And then we'll go ahead and group that again. So I can flip everything together. And exact same deal. I'm going to rotate the page again. I'm looking at now where C is. It is 1 unit to the right and 3 units up. So we'll flip it back around. And I will go 1 unit to the right and 5 units up. And I'll put C prime right there. So right about, if it'll work, that there is C prime. And now you've got the rotated shape. Go ahead and turn everything at once again. So I want you to think about here, look at where that red shape is. When I turned it, you see that's exactly where the black shape ended up. So that's a rotation, just like that. I would highly encourage you to actually do that with your paper. Turn the page, look at where the point is going to end up, how far to the left, how far up, how far down, whatever it is, and then go turn your page back and mark it. Okay, a couple of things here. Let's just take a look at a few things that kind of throw some people off with these. First of all, this one's pretty simple. I don't think there's anybody that's really too thrown off by translations. But here you've got an example of what a translation looks like on a computer program. This time you've got the translation vector. So if you see if I put it there, that would be going 3 units to the right and 2 units up. And you'll notice every single point here went 3 units to the right and 2 units up. So that one's pretty straightforward, I think, for most people. The reflection one gets a little bit trickier. So here you're going to see I have a triangle that is all the way in one quadrant. That's kind of what you just saw. So when I reflect over the x-axis, it pops up into the top. If I reflect over the y-axis, it pops over the side. Now, what gets a little trickier is what happens when I have some of the points on one side and some on the other. And you just have to treat each point separately. If I'm going to reflect over the y-axis, A is going to move over to here, but B and C are going to move over to there. You see that? It kind of ends up on top of itself, but if you just reflect each point completely on its own without worrying about the triangle at this point, just reflect the points, you'll end up with the right answer. You could even have something where, the shape is kind of centered on the graph. Then I could reflect over the X or over the Y, and they're still kind of sitting right on top of each other. And then we've got rotations. I'm going to try to keep these pretty simple for you, rather than having points kind of sticking all over the place, because that gets a little bit complicated for you pretty quickly there. So here it doesn't give me a direction. So what that means is that I'm just rotating counterclockwise. So when I rotate by 90 degrees, 0 degrees doesn't do anything. 90 degrees. I should have made that slider not do that way. All right. 180 degrees. And there's 270. And if you get to 360, you're all the way back to where you were. On the computer, it's a little bit harder to rotate your paper, but you're certainly welcome to pick up your Chromebook and give it a turn. There's nothing wrong with that at all. So let's go into the activity that we're going to do today. If you are on the landing page for Canvas on your Chromebooks, you'll see right there on Thursday, you got 1.9 in-class practice. So we go ahead and click on that. And what you're going to see here is 3 separate quizzers. There's a quizzer for translations, a quizzer for reflections, and a quizzer for rotations. And so what you need to do is get that half sheet of paper. Hopefully the teacher has passed that out for you. And we'll just kind of do a couple of these together. So if I were to do the translations one of my biggest suggestions here is to hit the full screen button that pops up right there at the bottom. It'll make your life a whole lot easier. And every time you hit new problem, it's going to give you a slightly different red triangle and a new translation vector. These points always just go back to here. what you're doing is you're using these blue points to create the translated image of the red triangle. You're not just moving the blue points over and up. Otherwise, it would be the exact same thing every time. So don't do that. What I might even start with is place the points on top of the points that they're given. Match up the triangle. Now do your transformation. We're going to go 3 to the left, 1 unit up. So we go 3 to the left, 1 unit up. 3 to the left, 1 unit up. And 3 to the left, 1 unit up. And now you'll notice those two triangles look exactly the same. When I hit check answer, it says, good, you got it, and we're ready to move on. Before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and write down the coordinates of A. So A is at the point -5, 4. B is at the point -3, 1. And C is at the point -2, 3. I'm going to write that down on my sheet and hit new problem and move on. Now, every once in a while, you'll get a problem where the red triangle actually isn't a triangle. Like that. If you get one of those, just hit new problem and start over. If you have something like this, that's actually even easier. All that's saying is to go up 2, and that's it. So this one is fine, but if you end up with a thing that's not a triangle there, then you can go ahead and hit new problem. Okay, next up we've got reflections. Most important thing here is paying attention to that line. The line is what's telling you which axis to reflect over. And so here it's this red line, it's the x-axis. So I'm going to take each point. I can always go ahead and put them on top of the originals if I want to. And to reflect point A, I'm looking at something like, oh, it's 5 units above that red line. I'm going to move it to 5 units below. B is 2 units above, so I move it to 2 units below. C is 3 units above, so I move it to 3 units below. Now you notice those look pretty much identical. And when I check the solution, it says I did a good job. Now, what if you had something like that? Looks pretty correct, doesn't it? It says it's wrong. You just have to make sure these points are exactly on the intersections, and then they'll work. But the last thing here is be aware that red line switches, not every time, but it's random. So pay attention to where that red line is. I'll have people that'll do like 2 of them and the line stays at the x-axis, and then all of a sudden it switches on them and they forget to actually look at it and they reflect over the wrong axis. Final one is rotations. Again, I would encourage you to make these full screen as soon as that little button pops up. Full screen. There you go. And every time you hit new problem, it gives you a triangle, it gives you a direction, and it gives you a number of degrees. Again, these are harder, but I would encourage you to, you can actually turn your Chromebook. That is probably one of the best things I can suggest. So if I rotate B 180 degrees, it's going to go way down here. 180 degrees. That one's actually pretty easy because it's right on the line. A, if I rotate it 180 degrees, is going to end up over here. Right about there. And if I rotate C 180 degrees, I'm going to end up about there. So again, when you're ready to check your answer, before you check your answer, look at those triangles. Do they look congruent? Are the sides the same length? Are the angles about the same? Then you can check your answer. This one's definitely the hardest. So take your time on those, try them out. The final thing you're going to get today is going to be this worksheet. This is pretty much the exact same thing you've just been doing, except it's on paper instead of on the computer. So you've got a triangle to start with. It's going to say translate it and then write down the coordinates of the new one. I need to see a picture on here of your new triangle, and I need to see the coordinates written down. When you get down to these rotation ones, remember, I would highly encourage you to turn your paper 90 degrees clockwise, turn the paper that way, and see what it looks like. See where the points end up. They start to get a little harder down here, but not too much. The rotations are the hard ones. Other than that, I think, yeah, you're working on this tomorrow, and you'll have some time to kind of wrap up any of those other assignments that you missed. I only get to see you one day next week, so we'll kind of use that one day as a little review, and then the whole week after that, we'll probably be looking at using that next week there as we'll probably have to do some sort of a quiz or a test while you're at home, unfortunately. But there you go. that's what you're doing the rest of this week. I will see you later.